collect data in cell cultures, we collect data from animal protocol. And a protocol really is the roadmap to stop. When you're going to stop the study, what events are going to cause me to stop the study. So all of the safety issues are built into this protocol. And this GCP, good clinical practice, that idea that the clinical trial has to be scientifically sound and described in a protocol, every study has to be described in a protocol, is in that guidance, okay? Extremely important for patient safety. The third step, so the third safety step after doing your homework and writing your protocol, is that this protocol has to be reviewed by lots of people. And peer review within our clinical trials community is really the cornerstone of the safety system, okay? So say I am a pharmaceutical company and I write this protocol. Within my company, there are protocol review groups who will review that internally. Within our organization that runs clinical trials, we review that protocol, okay? So many people review it. It then often will go to a regulatory organization after the protocol's been reviewed. It goes to the FDA or one of the European counterparts. Now they review that protocol, and they're looking for safety, safety, safety. They're looking for does the risk of this study, is it reasonably aligned with the benefits? Does it outweigh the benefits? Should this trial be done? Yes?
Is there usually a lot of back and forth cleaning up during this?
There absolutely is back and forth, and there's discussion, and everyone gets in agreement and becomes happy before that trial can even think about going forward. Okay? So lots of people thinking about the patient's safety, not just the one investigator who decided to do this study. Then, once you have a protocol in hand and you decide what sites, which doctors are going to do this study for you, okay, which doctors are going to do the study, at each of their individual sites, at Johns Hopkins, at Duke, at Emory, wherever you're going to run this study, they have another committee called an institutional review board or an ethics committee that then has to review that protocol again, okay? It sounds amazingly cumbersome, but everyone is invested in looking at that protocol and seeing if they agree with it. And if these guys at the local site, if the IRB says, look, I know the FDA looked at it, I know you looked at it, I don't like it, I think this is too much risk, the protocol dies, the study doesn't happen. So they have amazing power to keep patients safe, and this IRB group or ethics committee group review these protocols to be sure, even before the study goes on, that is a safe protocol, okay? And I think I did not recognize all of that before I started this, but it's an amazingly intricate system. And this is what the guidance says. So it says, first, that the trial has to be conducted with a protocol that received review from these IRBs. So it builds that into this rule book, okay? And importantly, the kinds of things that these reviewers are looking at, besides kind of typical safety stuff, is the fact that the trial, the risks and inconveniences have to be weighed against the benefit. And the trial can be initiated only if the benefits outweigh the risks. So that's what these reviewers have to think about. It also says that the safety and well-being of the subjects are the most important considerations and have to prevail over the interests of science and society, okay? So the review process, even before we haven't even started the darn trial yet, and we've had all this review to make sure that everyone's comfortable intellectually with this trial moving forward. Make sense? Okay. Now, we've done all that. We're happy. We've spent a long time getting our protocol ready, and we're happy that it's safe. Now we move from having that protocol ready into action. We've got to run that clinical trial. And the way most clinical trials are structured is shown here. So typically there's one person that is responsible for that clinical trial. It was that person's idea. That is often, if we're talking about a trial that is designed to bring a drug to market to treat sickle cell disease, for example, that's often a pharmaceutical company. We call them sponsors. Sometimes it is an investigator at an academic institution. Often a CRO, a contract research organization, which is what I work for, helps these sponsors or these investigators run these clinical trials. There's one group that is responsible, and then they select a variety of different people to help them actually recruit the patients and run the trials at these local sites. Does that system make sense and you guys understand that? And these sites can be in pediatric hematology, for example. If we're doing a pediatric sickle cell trial, there are places like Hopkins and Emory and Duke, they're academic centers. If you're looking at treating an ear infection in little kids, it's often at the pediatrician's office, right? Or it could be at a dental clinic or a dialysis clinic, anywhere, it doesn't matter, they're the sites. Now, the site team, what I want to talk about now is the team at the site, the place where they're actually recruiting the patients, getting the patients, and starting that trial, okay? And that site team typically consists of a principal investigator, and that's the person at that site that's ultimately responsible for that trial. And I'm going to talk about that, all of that person's responsibility, but that's the person absolutely in charge of that site. Helping that person at that site, as I already mentioned, is the IRB, the review board, that has to tell that person, yeah, it's okay to run the trial here, or no, I don't think this is a safe trial. They also typically have study coordinators that help them get the trial up and running, study nurses, so it's a group, but all of them are responsible for the patient, here in green, their safety. The sponsor, or the CRO, or whoever is globally responsible for the study also is responsible for that patient's safety. And the site and the sponsor communicate a lot, and I'll talk about that more. But this is what the principal investigator is charged with through this good clinical practice law. So they have to be well qualified, they have to be well trained. I have to provide all my training and my credentials if I want to run a clinical trial. They have to provide, above all, they have to provide good medical care to their study subjects, and the patient's welfare has to be put against the study. If that PI, if that principal investigator thinks that patient is being harmed, they stop the study at their site, no questions asked. They have to perform the informed consent. We talked a little bit about that before, but this is an enormously important safety part of the study infrastructure, because patients have to know what they're getting into. And someone mentioned the fact that these informed consents have gotten out of control, right? They're 25 pages long. You can't understand it. We're working on that. Lots of people are working on trying to simplify that process and find a happy medium between giving you all the information and making it user-friendly. But you have to know what you're getting into, and the PI has to do a good job of that. The principal investigator and study site team have to follow the protocol to the letter. When you don't, that's when you get safety issues, and I'll give you an example of that as well. The regular follow the authorities. And there's serious events that require hospitalization because of those serious adverse events. They have to be reported in 1 day. Within 1 day of that happening, everyone associated with this study has to know about it. Other more minor events get reported in a slightly less urgent way. And the principal investigator is also responsible for data, a qualified person running this trial at the site. Everyone involved in conducting this trial has to be qualified by education, training, and they have to have experience. So everyone associated with the trial is reviewed and their credentials are reviewed. And it says, this guidance says, that patients or subjects have to freely give their informed consent. Once again, absolutely critical. And this is all mandated. This is all mandated. It's what we have to follow. Now, we talked about, this is my version of artwork. I am not a good artist, so I'm sorry about the graphics. But we talked about the site teams, right? So in a study, you might have 100 different site teams, and each site may have 2 or 3 patients, like in green. So they're really looking out for those patients. But the sponsor team, like Dr. Bridges' team at Global Blood Therapeutics, or all of these sites together and all of these patients together. And that team usually consists of a project leader. There's a medical physician like myself that's looking over things, and there's an entire safety team. And you can start to see the beauty of this redundancy. So an individual site might see, hey, you know, I have one patient that got a little faint after I gave him a drug, but it was only one of the patients. But let's say we start seeing that's happening at every single site with one patient. Each individual site might not make a big deal about it, but you start to see it. All of that data, all of the patient data, and all of the safety data then comes into the person running the trial. with infrastructure that's put in place to analyze that data in real time and to look at it in real time, so that we're able to then see if we're starting to see some things happening to patients at sites that the sites don't even pick up. We're able to see that those are starting to happen and intervene before there are any safety issues. So there's a group looking over the whole trial like that, if that makes sense. Okay? So data being given from the site to the sponsor team that's looking at this continuously. And another important feature built into the clinical trial is, even though we trust our sites that they're giving us data, we don't really trust them completely, okay? Because we said this is too important, safety of patients is too important, data is too important. So we actually have people employed by the sponsor or by our organization called CRAs. These are clinical research assistants. And we actually send them out to all those sites. Each of those individual sites, they go out there and they work with the sites and they review all of the data that the sites have collected. They review the clinical records on the patients that have taken part in the trial. They make sure nothing is missed and they make sure everything is reported. So it's a system to be sure that we're not missing any safety signals or any data in that trial. So we actually send them out to make sure the data is complete, okay, before we analyze all of it, okay? So that's typically the way the site oversees a few patients and the sponsor or whoever's running the trial oversees the global trial and oversees all of that safety and data. But as they say on those bad infomercials, but yes, there's more. So in addition to all of that occurring, within these trials, sponsors or organizations like mine hire independent people to be on what we call a DSMB, a Data Safety Monitoring Board. These are typically physicians. For a sickle cell trial, for example, we would hire a sickle cell doctor that has nothing to do with this trial or the company or the drug. We might, if we think the drug might have an effect on the heart, we might hire a cardiologist just to look at all the heart data. We might hire a kidney doctor to look at all the kidney data. And they work as a group, and on a periodic basis, they take all of the data from the sponsor safety team and from the medical team that's overseeing the trial, and they say, give that to us, we're looking at it. They look at all of it, and they decide, they have the authority to decide whether they want to shut that trial down or not based on that independent review of all that data. Okay, this was a throwaway slide only to be funny. This slide represents the number of safety groups we have at my organization, at Quintiles. These are people, when I put up that little slide, safety team, this is how many teams, ridiculously, that we have at Quintiles that do nothing but safety, okay? That, just to give you a sense of the scope of the network of people that are looking at this safety. After the trial is done, or during the trial, depending on the details of the trial, regulatory agencies are the ultimate review of all of this, okay? The regulatory agencies are the ultimate review of all of this. And the sponsor or the CRO or whoever's responsible for that trial has to report all of this data back up to the FDA, to the European regulatory agencies, and they get to review it again, okay? They get to review it again and say, sometimes this happens during the trial, sometimes it happens after the trial, but they can ultimately say whether they believe that the patients are safe in this trial or that this trial has been conducted in a safe manner. Okay, so that is the overview of what the safety network, I think, is robust. And that's the main point I want to make here, is to take home to say, look, you can't promise everything's without risk, but I think there are a lot of people doing whatever they can to try to make the process as safe as possible. Preclinical research, protocol development, and review, study site teams that are well trained and provide medical care and do all the things they're supposed to be doing, and a sponsor and CRO team that performs ongoing review of safety and medical data throughout the trial to make sure that the patients on the trial are safe. And any one of these people at any time can shut the trial down and can say, we don't think this is going well and we're going to stop. Okay? Finally, regulatory bodies oversee all this. So I think I'm gonna skip my last slide here and just conclude by saying, look, you know, everyone understands safety is a top concern and may be a barrier to participation, but I think knowing about the infrastructure may help patients make decisions about whether or not they want to participate in trials. And so I'm going to stop there and take any, and we can talk about questions in the thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much for that overview of safety. As you all can see, there's a lot that goes into the safety and safety regulations of clinical trials.